This Equipment World video is brought to you by Chevron Delo 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash. Hi everyone, welcome back to Equipment World. You're watching The Dirt. I'm your host Brian, and today we're going to talk about tilt rotators. Those super popular attachments over there in Europe that are slowly starting to trickle their way into our market here in America. Today we're talking with Christian Yanes from Steelwrist, who's going to walk us through just how a tilt rotator can totally change your business. So the first thing, we're just going to fire this whole thing off with the typical American response when you talk about any sort of tilt rotator is, I could buy a mini excavator for that. What do I need one of those for? What's your response to this reaction?
I try to be as polite as possible, first of all, to that kind of approach. The tilt rotator mentally is not for everybody out there. We see that the people who are starting to use it predominantly are the ones who are already working with other kinds of technology, be it machine control system. It's the same there. You can buy a mini excavator for what you can pay for a system, like a machine control system, a dig assist, or you name it, 3D system. So those customers that aren't ready for this kind of technology, we let them kind of know what are the benefits and what are the disadvantages. But eventually they will figure it out. That's my belief. Eventually they'll figure it out once other people have proven to them that they can do the jobs much faster, more efficiently with this kind of technology versus having a mini excavator beside the big excavator standing still, right? I think the customer that is looking for this kind of technology is already looking at cost savings more than, even though I try to explain this is an investment. You can't see it as a cost. You got to see it as an investment. Because you'll be able to do more jobs with one machine. You'll be able to do the same jobs faster with that same machine. And you'll be able to do that job with less labor, meaning that you'll be able to eventually get a return on the investment and be making money out of it. We sell predominantly today in the Northeast and the Northwest, which typically have higher labor cost. So it makes more sense because you get the return on investment much sooner. So that's kind of the pitch on explaining to them that it's not a cost, it's an investment that they're looking at.
I will, just to kind of reaffirm what you just said, my experience with a tilt rotator was for the first week, 3 days was utter misery. I mean, it was going back to running an excavator for the first time for me, just because you have no idea what all of these new buttons do. And as a result, for a little while, your labor actually goes up because you're like, just take care of it with a shovel. But once you kind of get through that initial training phase, far less labor. I was able to get in so tight to anything I was grading that if you had any shovel work, it was a quick once over with a rake and you were done. It wasn't like a traditional excavator where, we're working on this funky slope, so you're going to have to hand tune all that in while I move forward another 20 feet and start working the next area.
It can potentially become a one-man show where you have one operator and one machine with a tilt rotator that will do the job, which once again, looking at the efficiency, you don't need to get rid of that labor, but you can put that labor somewhere else where they can be of benefit versus just standing, holding a shovel, looking at the machine work. So we normally say that the learning curve is a 2-week period for a professional operator who's used to running machines. For some people, it's much shorter. I've seen the younger generations that are used to the PlayStation and different consoles that get on the machine and you wonder, have you been on a tilt rotator before? And when they get out of the machine, they say no. Then you can see that their brain is already wired to kind of multitask. Older generations, they get there as well, but it's a longer period. And normally I say 2 weeks of frustration. And then after those 2 weeks, the sky's the limit. And you come to a point where they cannot dig without one. It's interesting how that happens from not being able to operate it to not being able to dig without one or being frustrated of not having one. But what I tend to say, if you're in a position where you find overwhelmed by all the buttons and all the rollers, just make sure that the bucket is facing your machine like you've always had it and dig like you always have done. Exactly. But then you see yourself in no time pressing those rollers to get that bucket to tilt or rotate to help you get where you really want to get.
Are you finding that younger generations tend to adopt the tilt rotators quicker than the older generations?
When it comes to operating and using the machines, I would say yes. But we got to remember that normally it's the older generation that is in charge of the money and the checks and what gets bought. So we do see a change when there is a generational change in companies where the kids are starting to run the business, but the parents are still involved. There we can see normally it is the kids pushing because they are the ones who are most commonly on Instagram and YouTube and social media where a lot of footage is being exposed to them. So then we kind of see that the push comes from them. But not only. I wouldn't say it's only them. We have a lot of customers of older age that are brilliant at this, not only in North America, but in other countries as well.
So you kind of briefly touched on it with the handwork, but what are some of the other ways that a tilt rotator can really change the way a company operates and thinks about that machine?
I would say predominantly every job that you put the machine on will increase in efficiency whilst having a tilt rotator on. Of course, I sell the product, so it sounds a little biased, but I have seen it, and I get those comments from customers that have taken the step and moved forward to actually buying one and starting to use one. I will never go back to working without one. Or I get calls from customers actually saying to me, today I saved $400 in just being able to unload that truck in 5 minutes on my own versus having somebody jump on the back of the bed and, deal with ropes and so on. So it's gratifying to be selling the product in North America. Because in Sweden or in Northern Europe and Scandinavia, where this is a must, where every machine has one, then the customers just buy one and they use it and that's it. But here, given that it's new, it's really fun to hear the feedback from customers that are like, why didn't we have this 10 years ago? Why did we wait so long in investing in a product that has made life so much easier for us? I think even operating becomes much more fun because there's another dimension to it, right? Of course, it's difficult to sell because it's new product. I think a lot of people are still waiting. Let somebody else try it. And if it goes well for them, we'll invest. But all that trying and testing has already happened in a different continent for the last 30 years. So it's actually being a little shy.
So I will say, to kind of touch back on changing the way you think, first of all, again, the first time I got my hands on a tilt rotator, after the initial frustration, what you said was 100% true. It was like being a new kid in a piece of equipment again. I've run excavators thousands of times, but that was the first time I got in an excavator that could flip the bucket around backwards and angle it over to the side, or it had a little pincher on the back that I could use to lift stuff up. And along those lines, that's where I really noticed the way it changed how I thought about the job entirely. It wasn't even, as an American operator especially, you're used to an excavator being a grading machine. And so you think about it one-dimensionally as a grading machine. But there's also fork attachments that you can throw on this thing. And now all of a sudden you can, in a very tight yard where even a skid steer might be a challenge to unload a truck, you're suddenly able to fork into things and spin them around and manipulate them in ways that you can't do with other machines. Reaching into the back of a truck to pull out your plate compactor and having the little gripper on the back that's, delicate enough that you can very carefully grab metal handles of your equipment. Now you saved a laborer climbing up in the truck and jumping out of the truck. It was just so many small things that it took me a week or two to really do it, but mentally I totally changed the way I thought about that machine functioning for me. It was really interesting how it caused me to totally retool my brain. But before we get into that, I want to take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants. Protecting your diesel engine and its exhaust aftertreatment system has traditionally been seen as an either-or proposition when it comes to choosing the engine oil that's going to protect your system. And that's exactly why Chevron spent more than a decade of R&D work developing a no-compromise formulation. Now, I don't have to tell you why a clogged DPF is bad news, but here's the real kick in the pants. 90% of that ash clogging up your DPF and then upping your fuel and maintenance costs, it comes from your engine oil. You might be thinking, why don't they make an engine oil with less ash in it then? You'll be happy to learn that Chevron agrees with you. They've developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by 60%, radically reducing the rate of DPF clogging and extending the DPF service life by 2.5 times. Before you had to choose between protecting your engine or your aftertreatment system. Now you don't. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology. It's time to kick some ash.
You come with a very good point. We see it as the excavator is no longer an excavator. The excavator is a tool bearer. Call it even though the product's originally from Sweden, call it the Swiss Army knife, where it will do a lot of different functions. Pallet fork is a great example where, in some instances, contractors are moving a skid steer or a loader to a job site just because they know that they're going to receive a load that they need to unload. Now, if you can unload that load with the excavator, you don't even need to bring that machine to this job site. This machine could be on another job site performing and being efficient versus having a machine that's standing still there for several hours just waiting for that truck that's going to unload curb or blocks or whatever it might be. So you can now do that with the excavator. With the gripper itself, you can start laying out the curb and then go back to the grading bucket and keep working. So it's not just the pallet forks. We have asphalt cutter, we have brooms, we have sweepers, we have rippers, grade digging, trench buckets, sorting buckets. I mean, the list is endless. And if there is an attachment that we don't provide, we do have the bracket that will weld onto that attachment. So you can always have an attachment that you might have in your yard that you want to use in combination with a Steelwrist, and you can weld that the same size bracket that the tilt rotator has and adapt that tool to the tilt rotator. So I mean, the sky's the limit, really.
This is why I need more time with tilt rotator. I haven't even begun to unlock the possibilities here. So I do have to ask, Steelwrist is not the only tilt rotator out on the market. So what are some of the things that really set Steelwrist apart from the competitors?
Well, we came in later on to the game. So we came in as an underdog where some of the other manufacturers had been in the industry for quite some time. So it became very obvious for us that at the beginning we needed to come with something different. We can't just offer the same thing for the same price and hope to make it because, like, people are brand loyal to different products. So what would get somebody to switch from whatever product they were using to Steelwrist? So we kind of positioned ourselves in an innovator position where we started bringing in new things to the industry. We were the first ones to come in with 45-degree angle, giving a little bit more tilt. 5 degrees doesn't sound like much, but when you have your bucket full of material and you're rotating, those 5 degrees are going to help you keep a lot of material in the bucket. We were the first ones to come with a steel casted solution. And that's, of course, we're adding a lot of weight at the end of the stick. We don't want the machine to be unstable or hoppy. So then by casting in steel, we were able to make a stronger product and at the same time reduce the weight of it. Something which is very important that maybe the potential buyer doesn't know is the building height. How much are we prolonging the height of the distance between the stick, the pin on the stick and the bucket pin? The more you're prolonging that stick, the weaker the machine is going to be, the less breakout force you have. So we were able to do this with a more compact solution so that the machine wouldn't lose as much power, so to say, when using it. So there is a lot of, sure, all tilt rotator manufacturers, they tilt and they rotate. Most of them come with a gripper. Some people call it the grab or the pincher. That is optional. But when looking at the product technically, there is a lot of other features and patents and so on that the tilt rotator companies offer to differentiate themselves from each other. We have, I would say, a very good control system, and I think we'll touch that soon, where it's not just hooking 2 lines and the tilt rotator is operating. We're actually installing a computer in the machine and making sure that it communicates correctly with the excavator so that the precision on all the functions is, as you mentioned earlier when using the gripper, proportional and very precise. So we have a very good advantage towards our competition as well with our control system, where our joystick, I think the L8 joystick is probably the most demanded tilt rotator joystick out there today.
Interesting. So we're not just putting joysticks with buttons into the machine when we install one of these tilt rotators. You actually have an interface that is working in tandem with the machine?
Yeah, of course. Back in the days, we would send, the way when it started, you just send an installation kit to a tech, a mechanic out there at the dealer, and they put it together. And it was a little bit of a one-size-fit-all installation kit. But with time, machines have developed, and machines are CAN-bus communication, some are not. So we can no longer do a one-size-fit-all. So if it's going, I'll give you a great example. The CAT 305 has an installation kit that is made for that machine. But if it's a next-gen machine, that same installation kit will not work because now we got to communicate with the CAT machine, making sure that there's no error codes that are popping up and making sure that the communication is correct because we are replacing original joysticks and putting our own. So, of course, the machine today, if they're very intelligent, they say, hey, there's a problem here. My joystick's missing. How can we make sure that we can replicate the signals that the Cat joystick or the Volvo joystick or whichever brand it is, because machines are becoming more and more advanced, without letting those error codes appear. We also have the integration to machine control system, where our control system needs to communicate with the machine control system. And I'll clarify, when saying machine control system, it could be Trimble, Topcon, Leica, MOBA, iDig, Hemisphere. There's a lot of systems out there and more coming. So there's an integration as well between our system and their system, so that when we rotate our bucket, we're giving them the signal and the positioning of where is our bucket located in relation to the ground, right? So there is a lot more technology than the eye can see, I would say.
That is far more, because I was very much under the impression that this was, okay, here's your 2 new joysticks that's got 3 extra functions on them, plug them in, go. And I had no idea, but it does make sense, especially like you said, with the grade control that's now coming a lot of times standard from the factory, that they are going to need that information. I hadn't even thought about that component.
So you have that option, and I tend to say the tilt rotator is a configured product. Imagine that you're going to go buy a new vehicle, and you go into the website of the manufacturer and you start, choosing the rims, and you start choosing the color, and do you want that option or this option, but I don't want that one. And at the end, you have a configured product. The tilt rotator is pretty much the same. A lot of people see it as a clump of steel that's hanging at the end of the excavator. But the gripper, for example, that we were talking about earlier, the pincher or the grabber, is an option. We have the option of mounting the tilt rotator directly at the end of the stick, and then the tilt rotator is always installed on the machine. Or we have the option of what we call it as a sandwich, where we put a quick coupler at the end of the stick that picks up the steel wrist, and then the steel wrist in itself has a quick coupler, allowing you to disconnect the steel wrist, put it to the side, and go straight onto your attachments. On the control system side, we have track steering. So if you want your machine to move back and forward without using your pedals, we can put that function on the rollers, on the joysticks. If we want to do that with a wheeled excavator, which is very popular in Europe, where the wheeled excavators are more predominant than they are here in North America, now we can steer the wheels on the machine on the roller without having to let go of the joystick to grab the steering wheel, which of course, once again, increases efficiency because the operator's hands are always on the joystick. We can do the same thing with a blade. Depending on the machine, we can have, let's call it blade control, where we can pull up and pull down the blade with the roller versus having to let go of the joystick to pull on the lever. There's a lot of options that we can put into the package, so to say, that will affect the price of the setup.
This is fascinating and way more in depth than I ever thought these attachments were. This is awesome. So that kind of leads us into my last question for you, which is really what's involved with the installation of a steel wrist tilt rotator. Is this something where I am dedicating a machine? It's only going to have a steel wrist on it. I can't go pull concrete anymore. Or do you still have some versatility with the machine?
Well, the common question when talking to somebody who is, let's say, knowledgeable in the area and trying to advise you on, the first question is, what are you intending to do with this excavator? Given I just explained the setup of having a coupler in between or no coupler, that's going to affect the potential of the possibilities of what attachments you can put on and what you should do or shouldn't do. For example, I normally tend to recommend the sandwich, where you have a quick coupler first and then the tilt rotator, because if you at any point you need the machine's maximum breakout force or maximum lifting capacity, you can easily remove the steel wrist, put it to the side, and go straight onto your attachments. Like a conventional machine, call it a pin-on bucket with a quick coupler. The moment that, or let's say that you have a bigger machine, a larger machine, and you know that for the next 2 weeks, the only thing you're going to be doing is loading trucks. You don't need the extra weight of the tilt rotator if the only thing you're going to do is this. So improve your cycle time, have a bigger bucket, don't wear out the product with no use. So then you would sandwich, take away the tilt rotator, put it to the side, and go on a bigger bucket. But then as soon as you need that finesse and you're going to do those cleanup jobs, or it's tight and you can't really reach, then you just put the steel wrist back on. So I wouldn't say that once you have a steel wrist, limiting yourself to some jobs, because you have the option of being able to take it off. Now, Brian, to take you to the next level of complexity, there is different systems out there. In our world, we call it the SQ. Other manufacturers have their own name for it. And what that entitles is that at the same time as I'm connecting the tool, the hydraulics for that tool are also connecting. So I'll give you the example. I can drop the tilt rotator without leaving the cab, and I can pick up a hydraulic breaker and use the breaker for 10 minutes, drop the breaker, go back to the tilt rotator in the bucket without leaving the cab. That's another configuration that we can add to the tilt rotator would be the SQ technology. But if you're a contractor that said, well, I don't have any hydraulic tools, I just have a dig bucket and a grade bucket, then I wouldn't promote the SQ. I'd say, well, you go with a standard S, is what we call it. And then if you did want to connect a grapple or any hydraulic tool, you would have to get out of the cab and connect them manually to hoses to get them to run. So like I say, the options are endless.
The reason I sit here just in silence for a moment is because I think about the efficiency, the versatility, and all of these benefits. And yet at the same time, in the other side of my brain, I can hear all of the American, that'll never work, that'll never work, that'll never work. And it makes me laugh because it's one of these things that it just takes going out there, putting your head down for 2 weeks and getting through that learning period. And I can fully attest, because I've ran a tilt rotator before, it totally changes the way you think about using that machine. And just the two parts of that conversation, they just crack me up at the moment, because we are really, it's almost like the American market is slowly coming into the present after being stuck in the past of 20 years ago. And they are kicking and screaming the whole way there, but it's incredible seeing these attachments finally take off.
I can easily say with all confidence, whether I worked for Steelwrist or if I go work somewhere else, the tilt rotator concept is coming, whether we want it or not. Whether it's a Steelwrist or another brand, the tilt rotators as a product and as like the new way of operating is coming faster than a lot of people think, whether you like it or not. And if we were to look back several years from now, we'll laugh at this conversation we're having now, because it'll be so obvious in a few years that so many people have a tilt rotator. So the tilt rotator concept is coming, whether you like it or not. And I would say the sooner you get on board with it, the more advantage you have to your competitors and competition that are blinded and not even paying attention at the new technologies that are coming.
Well, thank you again for Christian taking time out of his day to come on the show and talk to us about tilt rotators. I will say, I have run a tilt rotator, and once I got through that trial period, it was unbelievable what you could do with those machines. I absolutely cannot attest enough as to how much tilt rotators will change your business. So as always, thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode of The Dirt.